Hello and welcome everybody to this another exciting episode of the future of web. So today, this show is all about Web3 technologies. Here we get founders, co-founders, investors, designers, developers, community managers who are working in this space and try and find out through them, how they're impacting this space. So fantastic. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending upon where you're joining in from. My name is Alek, and I'm the host and founder of Animoy Solution, which is a Web3 design and development agency. So today's guest is somebody, like who I really called, recently got to meet him and got introduced to him. For me, after talking to him, and you would also find out, I've started calling him the OG of Metaverse. So he has been a practicing designer and emergent technology entrepreneur for about the last 2 decades. He's an educator. He's a visiting faculty across a number of institutions in India, as well as corporate trainer and a pedagogical designer. So he wears many hats. Yeah, so he's an artist, he's a designer, he's a coder, educator, futurist, subject matter expert in creating immersive experiences and VR, AR ecosystems. He is an alumni of Delhi's the NID National Institute of Design, Ahmedabad, and he's a passionate educator and spends a lot of time uh, teaching, training, and conducting workshops. Right. So he has founded multiple companies. We're going to find out about that. So and he's none other than Rahul Dutta. Let's welcome Rahul. Hello, Rahul.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
How are you, Ale?
Very good. Thank you very much, Rahul, for coming in.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah. And I mean, I announced for I brought you here so that we recently got introduced to each other, and I started calling you the OG of Metaverse, having known understanding your history and what
Um,
you've done, and I'm just wondering like why we did not meet earlier. But anyhow, now here we are doing this
yeah,
episode. So thank you so much for coming in, and
pleasure.
yeah, yeah, fantastic. Cool. So Rahul,
Okay.
so let's whenever I begin any of my podcast, I usually try and ask my guests, try and understand a little deep dive about that. So the first question I want to start with is, what is it that gets you up every morning?
I um, basically, yeah. Well, first, just a small correction. I wouldn't call myself an OG. The OG would be guys like Neil Stephenson and Phil Rosedale and the people who are really movers and shakers in the actual metaverse. I've
Yeah,
just been into it for the
yeah.
longest time. And what gets
Mm-hmm.
me up is that I think I pretty much have the most fun job in the world. I get to try out all these, say, new VR headsets. I get to design experiences for people. I get to almost like build entire worlds. So, I mean, I generally wake up feeling happy. There's always something new to do. There's always something new to discover. And that's been going
Mm-hmm.
on for the longest time. So,
Fantastic. Oh, cool. So that's a very nice thing, like so you saying that I would say in a way technology wakes you up, right? That gets you up to try
oh,
new
yeah,
technologies, what you're doing in that space, and how are
absolutely.
you, how it's impacting world, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Plus, like you see, my job has lots of different aspects, right? There's, I
Hmm.
mean, of course, management being primary at the moment because obviously I'm managing metaverse teams and VR teams and stuff. But I also
Absolutely.
like to get my hands wet with the design. Like I haven't really gotten away from that part of it. There's things to plan. There's always, things to do. So I guess my job is a mix of, art, design, technology, and management. And it's very refreshing because, I don't do anything twice. So it's always something new that comes up all the time.
Oh yeah, once a designer, I guess always a designer. So so I
Goodness,
started
yes.
my career as a graphics designer myself, since some 18 years
Lovely.
ago.
Huh.
Yeah. So you always try and bring, flavors of that in whatever you do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Nice.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So let's okay. So the next would be any secret that you want to share, which you haven't shared with, like not many people. Something that you can
Hmm.
easily share online, you know.
Uh-huh.
A little deep dive into, this is a little deep dive into you.
I mean, yeah, my life is an open book. Basically, I've been I got interested in metaverses as far back as 1997, and I set up
Mm-hmm.
my first metaverse development company in 2006.
Yeah.
And like, and I guess, unlike most other guys in the metaverse, I'm in it every day, right? So
Okay.
I've been a regular user in, say, this virtual world of Second Life since I think 2005, if I'm not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Every day there's a new metaverse that's there to discover. So I'm in Decentraland. I check out Sandbox. So half my life is actually spent completely virtually. And there are
Mm-hmm.
some interesting observations that kind of happen once you're inside the metaverse and inside multiple metaverses for so long. You start
Mm-hmm.
like really questioning your identity. You really start questioning who you are in the real world, based on what your avatar is experiencing. So I wouldn't say it's a secret, but like I would really encourage people to, if who are interested in metaverses, to actually explore them from the inside rather than, reading about them. And so I have two parallel lives, or three or four or five, depending on which
Mm-hmm.
metaverse I'm in.
Mm-hmm. Oh, interesting. So that's a very interesting point. So you said
Yeah.
three, four parallel lives. So do you have three,
Yeah.
four parallel families?
Absolutely, yeah. Like, see, the thing is that, and this is not even a joke. Like, some of my closest
Uh-huh.
friends have been my friends for the last like 15 years, inside
Mm-hmm.
Second Life. We've never actually met in real life. We've never even had like a Zoom conversation, for example. It's not necessary because the people you meet in the metaverse,
Okay.
the relationships you form are as real and as tangible as pretty much anything you'd find in the real world. So.
Uh-huh.
So
Interesting.
yeah,
So
just
that's a
to
very
answer
nice
your
take.
question, yeah, every one of my avatars has like a different life. It has a different personality, got a different friend circle. So
Oh,
borderline schizophrenia, I think, is going on here.
I wouldn't call that. It's just that you're a very jolly person, and you want to have a lot of explore and meet a lot of people. So that's great.
True that.
Cool. So I remember, so you said that you got inspired by the Snow Crash, by Neil Stephenson, right? So that's the OG. So
Hmm.
whenever we all started talking about metaverse, started researching about it. Like
Hmm.
I personally have been in AR VR since 2007, but I did not know about Neil Stephenson. I did
Right.
not know about Snow Crash. I got to know about it. To be honest, when we started talking about metaverse here about 2 3 years ago,
I
a
see.
side research just to see who that is. And
Hmm.
metaverse also came into being. Like we all know, it became
Hmm.
prominence when Facebook changed the name to Meta. So suddenly everybody started talking about metaverse, 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 right?
Absolutely.
So so
Absolutely.
so what? So let's go back to 95. When you, or sorry, 2005 or seven.
Hmm.
When you started
Hmm.
with your journey with the game that or the
Hmm.
the old metaverse, right? So how was it
Hmm.
been? How was the transition? How was your understanding?
It was very smooth actually. You see, the thing is that since 1997, since I read Snow Crash, my God, like it's crazy how much that book changed my mind about everything.
Mm-hmm.
After that point, I was more into the internet. After that point, I started getting interested in 3D. Um, all the projects that I've been doing since then, I had a design company which was doing 3D projects and stuff, but I wasn't really
Mm-hmm.
happy with that. And I've
Mm-hmm.
done the entire gamut. I've had like a performance car garage, I've had like a graphic design studio, I've done like lots of product design projects, especially in the medical field and stuff. And all of that was not like really, I mean, it was good. I was happy doing it, but I knew that there was something missing. So around 2005, I was consulting with this Swiss robotics and automation firm, and
Mm-hmm.
as part of that, we were kind of designing these environments. I got introduced to this really cool place called Second Life. There was another place called Active Worlds. There was,
Mm-hmm.
Entropia Universe. There was a lot of these metaverses already started coming in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So started doing a few projects inside the virtual world for that client of mine,
Mm-hmm.
and then realized that, listen, man, I'm actually having so much fun doing this. Why don't I just shift it over completely? And in 2006, I set up my first failed VR venture called VR1 with a few friends. It didn't last
Mm-hmm.
more than 6 or 8 months. Then I got
Mm-hmm.
like irritated. So around early to 2007, I set up my company Trimensions. And
Yeah.
Trimensions has been going, and Trimensions Metaverse Development was the full name of the company even back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I mean, it's been going great guns. In the middle, obviously, it had its ups and downs. Like 2007 was a good year for metaverses because everyone was like, wow, Second Life is the future. And there was this kind of hype cycle happening even back then, like, 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But now, I mean, I'm feeling that there's a concurrency of technologies and perceptions happening that are really looking promising for the future of the actual metaverse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because all of us for the last 3 years have been now become very used to talking to each other remotely. Zoom has become
Yeah.
like the norm. It's not like such a
The
big
de
thing to jump
facto.
into a
Yeah.
it's not a big thing to jump into a world. A lot of people are experimenting with that as well. So,
Yeah.
so that transition for me was actually super smooth. Like I've been wanting to do
Mm-hmm.
it, and eventually I started doing it.
Oh
Yeah.
yes, so it becomes easier, like because you got
Hmm.
inspired by virtual world, and you have an open mind
Yep.
and you see how that is, right? And now that
Absolutely.
because of COVID, you like you said, uh, the Zoom or Google Meets became de facto tools for people to for teams to interact, and now there are a lot of
Absolutely.
transition happening towards metaverses. So
Yep.
how would you define a metaverse? Let's start from there.
Very straightforward, yeah. Like it's, the what eventually the internet is going to evolve to. It's a way where you can actually meet and interact with people inside three-dimensional environments, and pretty
Hmm.
much do all of what you do in the real world. You'll be doing in this three-dimensional environment, which is geographically unlimited. You know, so the
Hmm.
potential is there for us to actually have multiple avatars doing multiple jobs across different metaverses, right?
Hmm.
And there's a clear differentiation here, in which I've written about very clearly. Like today, people are making metaverses, right?
Hmm.
Plural,
Hmm.
but the metaverse, singular, right, is actually what we'd call the internet today. It's a
Hmm.
gigantic conglomeration of all these different technologies of digital twins, IoT, all these things converging to form this huge sort of extension of the internet
Hmm.
or the evolution of the internet.
Hmm. Okay. So what I understand, so what you're saying is that, this whole metaverse, like these are still silos, right? What
Yeah,
people are trying to generate right now. And, everyone has this own definition what a metaverse is depending upon their experience.
right. Hmm.
Recently, like about a month ago, I read about somebody who's very efficient in IoT and, big data and stuff. And he
Hmm.
mentioned one of his designations as metaverse practitioner. So
Nice.
yeah, so it was very odd, like for somebody who's coming purely from technical background, pure tech
Hmm.
background, lot of data, talking about
Hmm.
being a metaverse practitioner. I wanted to know a
Yep.
little more, but just didn't
Hmm.
find much. But so what I'm trying to say is, everyone's creating their own definition.
Absolutely.
And I also see that metaverse as a one big place. It's like you mentioned, the internet,
Hmm.
and where you can,
Hmm.
have different worlds within it. So you can have call them mini verses, or independent housing
Hmm.
places. Because what will eventually happen is all that is in the physical will
Yep.
may or or might or maybe 50-60% of it will translate into a virtual environment, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you think about it, there's this movie called Ready Player One,
Yeah.
which really actually visualizes that very, very effectively. Because in there, the avatars are going to different kinds of planets. Each planet is a separate world in itself.
Hmm.
Each planet is dedicated to something or the other. One is an educational metaverse, the other one is a casino metaverse. There are like these racing and gaming metaverses. There's player
Yeah.
versus player metaverses. So they're all like different virtual worlds unto themselves, probably developed by different people. But
Uh-huh.
the thing is that your avatar can actually traverse between these virtual worlds very effectively, which is something that hasn't yet happened.
Absolutely, and that's see what will happen is because these are most of the metaverses will be built on different blockchains, because that's how
Right.
your identity and soulbound tokens and zero knowledge proofs,
Hmm.
would come into be. If and the
Right.
soulbound tokens, we already started talking about it, with people getting POAPs and stuff like that. So
Okay.
what will happen is that interoperability will only happen, once how do I say it? Once all these blockchains, or
Right?
bridges. There are bridges to talk between different blockchains, and different metaverses can talk to each other. And then you can only
Absolutely.
actually take your identity, uh,
Yeah.
from
Right.
one place to the other, right?
Right. I'd sort of, sort of draw a parallel to the early internet, Web 1.0, as
Yeah.
you call it. Right.
Uh,
At that point, it would not have become the entity it has today without certain protocols actually coming into very strong play. Right.
mhm.
So you have TCP/IP, you have HTML, you have PHP, you have a number of things which are not like really, without which you would not have the internet itself as you kind of understand it. Right.
Mhm.
So those protocols, that backbone of the metaverse still has to be built as yet. And people are
Exactly.
really, in fact, all the tech giants are also coming together under the Metaverse Standards Forum to explore how you can actually have this interoperability happening very, very seamlessly. So this is something that's in progress.
Oh yes, and the way I see it, you brought in Metaverse Forum, right? So
Hmm.
there are a lot of giants who are part of it, and there's a lot of
Hmm.
scope for people to join in and be a voice in that making. But
Yep.
don't you think eventually what will happen is all these big giants, once they
Hmm.
start seeing value, like, and a lot of them are already seeing it. Like
Yep.
Accenture has onboarded about 1.5 lakhs or 2 lakhs of their, new
Hmm.
joinees on through a
Hmm.
metaverse platform. Skoda
Yep.
as a car company has already a Skoda verse, and there's several other examples. So don't
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
think again the power will shift towards the big ones who have the, like the money, so to say, and
Yes and no.
not,
Yes and no.
yeah.
I mean, think about it. Like you do have a Google, of course, a
Hmm. Hmm.
google.com today. But
Hmm.
apart from the google.com, there are a billion other websites,
Hmm.
and not one of them is more or less important, than each other. It's just that every website has a specific function. Every website, has something to sell. Every website has its own thing. Um,
Hmm.
so it's not going to be a complete like takeover in that sense, right? And
Hmm.
as you mentioned, that decentralization will be, whether one likes it or not, like a very big part of the whole,
Yeah.
metaverse thing going forward, right?
Yeah.
Personally, I'm a little controversial. I'm not seeing any major contributions blockchain has towards metaverses today, except for the
Yeah.
fact that all of the things that you own, all of your assets, all of your clothing and everything is stored in your wallet rather than on another company's centralized server. I see
Yeah.
that as a very, very good thing. But apart from that, like I don't really see any monopolies really coming in, because of its very nature, you can have like a gigantic set of things, and and still you have a lot of autonomy and a lot of independence.
Yes. Oh yeah. So that's a, so what I want to tell people is, you can create metaverses without blockchain as well. Metaverse
Yeah,
comes into the, and then it's just a virtual world, right?
yeah,
Why I say it becomes a metaverse is because you can have those NFTs on blockchain, your SBTs. You can have access
mm.
to metaverses through your wallets, depending
Through
upon
your
blockchain
wallet.
that is.
Yeah.
Exactly. So all those makes it a little, blockchain compliant or blockchain use case,
Yes,
right?
absolutely. You see, and identity is critical inside metaverses, much more so
Yeah.
than your Google password getting you to other, all websites, universal access kind of thing. Your identity would be something that would be curated by yourself over multiple metaverses that you go to, things that you actually collect for your avatar, ways to customize it, accessorize it. It's really hilarious because I think in Second Life alone, I have about 800 different avatars, and I can
Wow.
switch into them on a whim. Like, so there's one that's like a fantastic alien cyborg thing. There's another one that's like me in a business suit, basically, when I want to go to those meetings. There are all kinds, like, so that identity switch is also something that's really very interesting inside metaverses.
Oh yeah, so so I am not used to Second Life. Very very
Hmm.
a small experience of what Second Life can do. But from what
Hmm.
you're coming from, and it's the, I would say, Second Life is the original metaverse, because it has
It
all
would be.
huge spaces, and can have different experiences, and
Yeah.
having so many avatars within the same environment is, it's in a nutshell. So do you think that does it give a lot of freedom for people, like, let's
Hmm.
say for people who are more introverts, so to say,
Hmm.
right? There's certain, we all know, they're, so does it give them more
Yes.
freedom, or is it, you say, it's bipartisan and it's equal for everybody?
No, no, without a doubt. You see, the thing is that inside a metaverse, you have no way of knowing what a person's skin color is, or what their gender is, what their actual, cultural background is, right? You very
Mm-hmm.
quickly learn to relate to people as people on the basis of their actions, their words, their deeds, their karma, the good that they're doing or the bad that they're doing to other people.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, like it is very, very empowering. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, of course, I mean that anonymity and identity can be misused as well as used well. There are two sides to that coin as well. So you know,
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what I'm trying to say is, what I have noticed per se, in being part of different metaverses, be it
hmm,
spatial or or space VR, and we'll talk a little bit about that later as well. But
hmm.
what I have noticed is that people try and create avatars of how they kind of look, with
It's
an added
aspirational.
yeah, so with an added self-expression as avatars. So somebody wants
Yep,
to have braids, probably who's bald, so who'll have nice long hair with nice glasses and nice
yeah,
funky tattoos, stuff like that.
true. I know my
So
avatar doesn't have a belly, man. Like which I really, he's aspirational.
yeah,
I'm trying to lose mine, so
yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah, I get what you're saying.
Oh
Go
yeah,
on.
absolutely. So that's interesting. So how do you, so now I'm sure you're a metaverse strategist and you're consulting as a metaverse person for a lot of companies. So what sort
Correct.
of request do you have? Any funny thing that you come across?
All the time, yeah. Actually, and it's been going on for years.
Mm-hmm.
Very hilariously, it was unexpected how I started my own metaverse journey. My
Mm-hmm.
first client in the metaverse was actually Amul, the dairy giant.
Mm-hmm.
And they wanted me to build a virtual ice cream parlor inside Second Life.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'd asked me what the last thing I'd have expected for my very first VR, my very first metaverse project, that
Mm-hmm.
would absolutely be it, right? But what happens is that my job actually entails answering a lot of questions that people have because they have no idea actually how these things function, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my job is actually to make it clear to them that how can they actually contribute within it? What would be the
Uh-huh.
useful part of metaverses or even virtual reality experiences or simulators for them, right, in their own
Mm-hmm.
context?
Mm-hmm.
And the funny part of it, obviously, is the fact that people are coming into it from a base of utter ignorance sometimes and willful ignorance sometimes. So I can recall a client who wanted an AR experience where he thought it would be like a holodeck in Star Trek, where things are
Okay.
just magically appearing as holograms in front of you. And I had to kind of explain to him that, listen, boss, no, all of this shit happens through your phone. It doesn't, there's no such real holograms happening. There's no such thing. There's no
Yeah.
such technology. So
Yeah.
so a lot of times my job is just to sort of clarify to people firstly what the technology is and how the
Mm-hmm.
technology can be actually used to improve their own situation or used in
Yeah.
their own context.
Interesting. Oh yeah. So for I also understand. So there's a lot of education involved when you are actually trying to, try and start something within Web3. So metaverse or NFT
Hmm.
marketplaces or even apps on blockchain. So that's what we do. So there's a lot of education involved, and
Absolutely.
yeah. And what I've realized is, after talking to tons of people, that people usually fear what they don't understand,
Hmm.
and so the starting point would mostly be an apprehension rather
Yeah,
than inquisitiveness and curiousness. I mean,
correct.
so my theory says that it has to do with how we are actually brought up, within the
Hmm.
society, as education, and how we are culturally brought up. So the
Hmm.
first step is usually a fear or
Aye,
apprehension. So how do
absolutely.
you tackle that? How do you tackle that? It's a through metaverses. Let's just discuss
Right.
that use case.
Yeah, see, the thing is that metaverses do have a learning curve in the sense that you'll
Hmm.
have to learn how to control your character, make him move around, make him jump, make him fly, do all those
Hmm.
things. Plus, there's a whole lot of things about how do you communicate with other people, what is etiquette, how do you actually perform and behave within virtual worlds, right?
Yeah.
So I had an interesting experience. You see, I'm an educator, and since the early 2010s, I've been very keen to start getting universities and colleges and stuff uh, into the metaverse. And as a
Hmm.
result of it, I've taken classes in pretty much every Ivy League college, sitting here in Gurgaon, as an avatar. And the issue
Wow.
I'm finding actually is not so much with the teaching of students or teaching of general people, right, or
Hmm.
younger generations, because they can pick up the technology really, really rapidly,
Really well.
right?
Okay.
But the problem is that how do you get a university's vice chancellor to get into a metaverse? How do you get the teachers to start teaching inside the metaverse? Those
Yeah.
kind of tools are a lot more complex than the kind of tools that they're using today. And in any case, a lot of teachers have a lot of issues with digital technology as a whole, right? Because they're from a
Yeah.
slightly older generation. They've just about started getting used to smartphones, and they were like, now, oh my God, now I have another this thing, another platform to sort of start learning. So the
Yeah.
resistance is quite major. But as user experience designers, these are all problems to be solved, right?
Yeah.
People can be guided in how to actually get into metaverses. They can be guided into how to actually use the tools within them. So I'm not seeing this as a problem that's going to happen, for a very long time. I'm sure
Hmm.
as the metaverses evolve, there will be tools to make them simpler, much more functional, as well as sort of get an understanding of how a community behaves inside a 3D space.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what I understand is, I don't think it's going to be safe for education institutions, because I do a lot of sessions for different engineering
Hmm.
colleges and stuff. And
Right.
now I've just started to reach out to a lot wider audience. What I think, it's
Hmm.
not going to be a top-down approach, where you first have to convince the like you said, the vice chancellors, the tech heads, the HR,
Hmm.
or the curriculum creators in these institutions. It's going to be the
Uh-huh.
bottom up. So the students will push them. We want to learn about
Yeah,
this. You want to talk about this,
absolutely.
and that's how they will kind of be enforced. uh, right. So after that
For
answer, we'll
sure.
take a couple of quick question one of the users sent. So how do
Hmm.
you see that panning out in your experience, or how you're talking to institutions?
Well, as a matter of fact, I'm a consultant for a company that's creating this web of universities on the metaverse. Right? They're creating
Mm-hmm.
a building a platform around it. And
Mm-hmm.
see, the thing is, it's very straightforward. The first step is actually just establishing your presence inside the metaverse, which is not a difficult thing at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
In today, like if you want to set up a space in Decentraland, for example, you could just hire somebody to actually build the entire thing out for you, or
Mm-hmm.
take a little time out. It's got its own builder. You can actually start building out stuff within it, right? So that first
Mm-hmm.
step is actually getting your virtual campus or your entire building or your institution or your company into the metaverse in the first place,
Yeah.
right? That's becoming easier and easier as days go by. Like today, it's not like terribly difficult to actually establish your things. And with the kind of tools that I'm building for this platform that we're developing, the kind of tools
Mm-hmm.
that we're building, we're going to be able to sort of let people just click and drag things onto their land and put up buildings and automate the entire process as much as possible, right? And another major thing I'm going to start seeing, which we're
Mm-hmm.
really going to start seeing, is this one-click process with AI developing all of the spaces and all of the content, all of the assets automatically, just based on what you're asking it to do. So I don't see that
Yeah.
entry point being more difficult as time goes by. It actually gets a lot easier. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, so that's one of the cases. So what we do is,
Yeah.
like at Animo, we already have one office in
Hmm.
Metaverse, because being a Web3 company, like you mentioned, we have to
Hmm.
have those technologies available within house, so that people can
Yep.
understand them better. So we sometimes
Absolutely.
do, like you're doing a lot of sessions in metaverses for all Ivy League colleges. So we're
Hmm.
doing, we invite some of our customers who are a little tech savvy, and
Hmm.
bring them in, right?
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
we bring them in here, and then have
Yeah.
them experience it.
You can't build a metaverse from the outside, man. It's absolutely
Absolutely.
not possible. This is something I find myself saying to every client. Boss, if you're
Yeah.
going to be building it, my friend, you need to be inside it. You need to be immersed in it. You need to be, following it as a daily routine rather than okay, we're hiring this guy to actually build the whole thing, and at some point we will figure out how to, use it once it's been built. It doesn't really work that way.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, I had to do that, being a public platform.
I
Right.
hear you. Yeah, I
Sorry.
hear you. I know, and I'm notorious for
Yeah.
this, man. I smoke everywhere. Sorry.
That no, no, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, it's a choice you made, but we want to make sure that we don't promote it enough. So,
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah,
And the nice thing about meeting virtually is that, yeah, at least it's not getting in your face, you know.
yes,
Uh,
yeah,
I mean, due
yeah. So
apologies to all
now,
the non-smokers. Yeah, go for it.
yeah, let's just take a quick question, by one of the users.
Hmm.
So here it is.
Hmm.
It says that how enterprises can leverage metaverse.
They're already doing so. You see, the thing is that there are lots of ways one can do this, right? And there are lots of many different layers to this, starting with just basically establishing your presence. Like Merrill Lynch, for example, has set up a bank inside
Hmm.
Decentraland where people can go in with their questions and they get them answered. They can set up new accounts. There's some amount of functionality happening, right?
Hmm.
The other way to do it also then is to create a digital twin. Like digital twins are a very, very major thing in the enterprise segment at the moment. Where you
Yeah.
have a literal digital copy of the entire building that you're in, and all of your employees are going inside it and doing their regular jobs from their homes, but being monitored by their managers just as they would in a real office setting. Other companies are experimenting with setting up their showrooms. I mean, all the retail brands now are getting very interested that, how do we actually set up showrooms where people can actually, not tangibly, but at least view a three-dimensional, a version of the product that we're selling. There are, I mean, use cases being found daily for this kind of stuff now, right? So
Hmm.
for me, enterprises, I mean, it would be good. Like you said, Accenture's put like a ton of, it's put a bunch of its workforce into the metaverse, and they're experimenting with
Yeah.
how you can actually have an office with 15,000 people, who are interacting and doing their work and getting supervised, getting monitored, getting managed, all from inside that space. So enterprises are getting into metaverses in a very, very large way. And again, this is like a part of my job. Um, okay,
Yeah.
so somebody just asked you, can you expand on digital twin, how it works,
Digital twin. Yeah, how it
right?
works. Yeah.
Um, it's very interesting because in 2008, I got exposed to digital twins, right, by
Hmm.
Siemens and
Yeah.
inside Second Life. So Siemens, I think now it's like, yeah, like 12 years, down the line, and I can talk about it. At that time, it was a highly secret project. Basically, they'd created versions of their actual physical offices, right?
Hmm.
So if they have an office in Stuttgart, for instance, um, they made an absolute replica of it, and this is a scaled down digital twin, right?
Okay.
And in the real office, for example, this is just one functionality out of like 1,000 that are possible. Right, in the
Hmm.
real offices, there are temperature sensors, there are automatic light switches, there are a whole bunch of sensors and actuators that let you control the environment of the building. Right. So
Hmm.
one way to do it is to automate the entire process. That say, for example, a building that's facing the sun will need, lower temperatures, and the
Hmm.
part of the building that's away from the sun will need higher temperatures, for example.
Higher temperature.
Right.
Okay.
So how do you automatically regulate that from the digital twin? That's one way to
Hmm.
actually do that. That you can actually control the light sensors and detect when there's no people in a room, just switch off the lights. So in a way,
Hmm.
it makes it a lot more efficient and a lot more, a power efficient, for example, or energy efficient.
Hmm.
There are lots of other things. So you have digital twins of machines, like Tesla. Each Tesla car that you have has a digital twin, right? Which is an absolute functioning digital version into which all the sensor data from the car is being fed almost in real time, right?
Hmm.
And so, say, like, for example, you have a machine inside a factory, right? Those machines, production machines, for example, are also running very, very long working hours. So, using the digital twin, you can actually predict how much, when the next maintenance cycle for the machine would be, right? There are lots of useful ways that digital twins can be really leveraged to actually bring about a lot more efficiency.
Absolutely.
Right?
So I'll add an example here. So I think it was Mercedes or one of the big, car manufacturing companies who created a digital twin of their entire, manufacturing
Manufacturing
plant,
plant. Yep.
manufacturing plant, right? And they simulated it, and then they could find some issues within that digital twin experience.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
before they actually expanded onto the physical,
Onto the physical
kind of,
thing. So, A digital twin actually typically also can get created before the physical one does. So that,
Yeah,
like Mercedes, for example, was figuring out different layouts and arrangements inside that digital
yeah,
twin of
yeah,
various components inside that production plant.
yeah,
You can even have digital twins of humans. I mean, your virtual influencers now are becoming a big thing, right?
yeah.
So that's also as much a digital twin as a Tesla, for example.
Absolutely. So my question, so follow up to that would be, if you were to explain to somebody
Huh,
that when people are creating a digital twin, so how
huh.
does it actually pan out? So they still use Unreal or Unity, excuse me, to create these digital twins and automate everything, put all the code in, how the actual
It depends.
functionality is, like a
Got
conveyor
it.
belt going taking one part to the other part. So that needs to be
Got it.
automated. So how do you
Hmm.
really find that those challenges within that digital twin?
So basically, what happens is, let's say in architecture, right? You have a thing called a BIM, a building information model, right? And these are not created in Unreal and Unity or any game engine. They're created in things like Revit and other industrial CAD programs like that, right?
Yeah.
And those things are super detailed. They have everything down to the last like millimeter sorted out, right?
Yeah.
Now, based on those, you can actually start again. So they're not created in Unreal and Unity necessarily, right?
Hmm.
They're created in very dedicated, specialized programs that actually are suited to this kind of task, where sensors from the actual building and from the actual machines inside the building, that data has to be fed inside the digital twin in real
Hmm.
time. So there's a
Hmm.
lot of communication protocols that are also like really needed for these kind of digital twins to
Yeah.
actually function. And the amount
Yeah.
of data that's flowing between the real space and the digital twin is ridiculous. It's in the terabytes. You know.
Yeah.
So
Interesting. So if one company would want to, like, let's just try to take a hypothetical situation, to make people
mm,
understand, because there's a couple of
huh,
questions on digital twin. So if
huh,
one company wants to, hypothetically first create a digital twin, right? So
hmm,
what would the whole, ideation process? Okay, so we understand the ideation. It goes into CAD.
yeah,
They understand, how the building infrastructure needs to come up, right?
huh,
So how does it take it from their point once they have the basic infrastructure? Like you said something about BIM, right? So that's
right.
business information model. So once that is ready, how does it translate
Hmm.
into a virtual world, and how they can actually use it?
Got it. That's a little complex. You see, the thing is that there are tools for actually doing this. Now, Vuforia,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
you're familiar with it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Vuforia is one of the tools,
Right?
for
Exactly.
Android,
So,
and
for example, like one of our tech partners is this company called PTC, which owns Vuforia and a bunch of other AR-enabled tools for IIoT and digital twins.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
What they do is that first they actually analyze the entire space, what its function is going to be, how it actually what is the stuff that you want out of it, right?
Hmm.
And based on that, they
Yeah.
have a certain tool set and a certain production pipeline, which is going in parallel with the construction of the entire building, so that people even during the construction can see what stage the construction is at, for example,
Hmm.
right? And once the construction is done, then the digital twin becomes a repository for all the data that's coming in from the actual physical twin, right? And then you can start manipulating that data to see how you could get better efficiency, how you can get more, productivity, how you can get better energy, fewer emissions, all those parameters. Then you have to kind of set at the point where you're building your digital twin. A very simple example of this is that you can control all
Hmm.
this the lights and fans and stuff inside your smart
Hmm.
home using a digital twin of the smart home,
Hmm.
right? So if you're in office,
Yeah.
you just go into your house and you start switching on the oven. You preheat your food. You kind of switch on the basic lights, or tell it that, okay, listen, man, I'm going to be back at this time or the other. Track my movement, and when I'm within a kilometer of the house, just start all these processes. So there's like a ton of ways you can actually use digital twins. It's a
Oh
very
yeah, yeah.
fantastic idea.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of IoT devices also not now available, which are
Yep, yep,
remote
yep.
controlled. So then you can, integrate all of that, into these digital twins.
In
Recent,
Yep.
yeah. So I've come to know of an example, where all you have
Hmm.
these big manufacturing machines, and
Hmm.
it's a pain to, train the users in these
Yep.
companies, who use these manufacturing machines, how to work them, how to service them, and stuff like that. So
Right.
what a lot of manufacturing companies are trying to do is they're trying to build metaverses or digital twins of those machines and train their support staff or installation engineers on them in metaverse, so that there's minimum damage while installing
I,
to the machine, because these are
absolutely.
super expensive ones, right?
Got it. And
So
these are things
that's
that my company does as well. And my companies have been
yeah,
doing for years, right? We create
yeah,
simulators for training, we create simulators for production. And we are like sort of technology agnostic. Yeah? We decide what technology best fits the need once we get the outline of the project, right? So, for example, if an operator is sitting on a machine on premise, like in front of the machine at a thing, you can have smart
hmm,
glasses which show him on the machine itself, in an AR overlay, what are the procedures to actually start following, right? If the machine is not in front of the operator, then virtual reality is the most logical way to go about it, where you have a
yeah.
digital twin of the machine, and the guy can actually start doing the maintenance and the operating procedures and stuff and training himself on that machine itself. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Oh, absolutely. So you quickly mentioned about your company doing it, which is I think Trimensions Metaverse development, right? So can you little expand a bit of what all do you take care of, for audience to understand?
Got it. There are actually two, three companies. Like I set up startups at the drop of a hat, and so the
Yeah,
other
yeah.
the company that does the simulators and is a partner of PTC is called Hyper Reality Studio. You
Hyper.
know,
Okay. Yeah.
and that does like mainly the heavy industrial stuff. It also does a lot of 360 shoots. It's very versatile.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Trimensions is a pure metaverse consultancy. It has always
Mm-hmm.
been that, and I don't think that's going to change at all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Its main object is to demystify the whole metaverse concept for industries as well as educational institutions, as well as government, as well as military, as well as like guys like
Yeah.
ISRO and stuff. So Trimensions is a pure consultancy, and there's a second consultancy that we just started. I've started with a very good friend of mine called Ram Ramalingam, which is called Chain Agents, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is specific to the Web3 and the metaverse.
Mm-hmm.
That how do you actually go about? What's your starting point? Where do you actually start building these things? You have an idea in your head, but how to get
Yeah.
that idea into practical, real world, how does it answer to real world things is what we guys specialize in.
All right. So there you have it, users. So how you, if you want to just follow Rahul on LinkedIn, he's available as the name Rahul Dutta. You just find for him, and you can follow him, get in touch with him directly, and he has these companies. I'll relay the names again. That's Hyper Reality Studio and Trimensions Metaverse Development, and now the
And
Chain Agents.
correct.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So that's all right. Cool, Rahul. So let's continue. So okay, so the two primary tools available for people building metaverses is
Hmm.
Unreal and Unity, right? To create all those
Okay.
interactions,
Yeah.
and then
Yeah.
you have and then you have these platforms like Spatial,
Hmm.
Decentraland, Sandbox, Space VR, which unfortunately very recently closed down. So after I think
It's
31st
closing in
March
March,
or
but like yeah,
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 closing
yeah,
March.
yeah.
So it's kind of closed down, and then they're moving to Microsoft Mesh and stuff like that. And
Hmm.
there are tons and tons of platforms coming up. So if somebody wants to start with a very basic without, so let's assume that, you have done one round of education to them to understand what a metaverse can do for them.
Right.
What would be the journey be for the customer, for the user, for the industry
Yeah.
to have that discussion forward with you, who is an expert
Hmm.
and a strategist, to start from? And what tools
Okay.
would you recommend using?
Understood. So, see, the thing is, my constant advice to anybody trying getting into the metaverse for the first time is, before you actually dive right in, dip your toes in the water, right? Just figure out how things actually function inside metaverses. So first, I'd encourage them to go to different metaverses, check them out from the inside, create their avatars, go through the entire process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, like you said, metaverse and spatial are two very interesting tools to actually start getting inside these spaces as avatars without any major cost to anybody, right?
Yeah.
So I walk them through these kind of smaller metaverses and get them an understanding of first, you have to get them to understand how to interact within virtual spaces, then to
Yeah.
develop within virtual spaces, right? And a lot
Mm-hmm.
of these platforms like Decentraland have their own creator tools. So there's a little bit of learning that kind of needs to also happen there. You need to get your head into that 3D space. That how do I put a wall this side? How do I put like windows? Where do I put scenery? What are the functional things that I want inside the metaverse? Um, Unity and Unreal have very, very major learning curves that way. right?
Yeah.
Which is, of course, if they didn't, we guys wouldn't have a job because this is what we guys
Yeah.
do. We create stuff
I
for people,
agree. I agree.
you know.
We do that.
So, right. So the thing is that once they get an understanding of how to function within a metaverse, then comes
Hmm.
the time to actually try and visualize and plan what they want inside their own metaverse, right?
Hmm.
So before we even get down to the game engine and the 3D modeling and everything, there has to be a lot of planning. There has to be the design key. Man, do you want it to be futuristic? Do you want it to be low poly? Do you want it to be? And I give them the positives and the negatives of each of these. If it's low poly, then it's a lot faster and more efficient, but it doesn't look so good. If it's absolutely
Yeah.
photorealistic, half your users won't be able to use it because it's going to need a computer with a graphics card.
Yeah.
So these kind of questions get answered as we interact within the metaverse and different metaverses. The clients themselves and people themselves can get an idea of actually how things function inside them. And once they do that,
Hmm.
I've seen that there's a tangible click, there's a switch that gets, a turn where they're like, oh, I get it now. We have to do this inside it, and then they start getting their own ideas, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Because everyone's got a different idea of what they want to do, but nobody's got a very clear idea. So my first step is to actually get that clarity to people, that how do you actually do this? And then we can figure out the tools, yeah. In fact, apart from Unreal and Unity, there are like tons of other game engines like Northlight and Havoc.
Yeah.
And, if you
Havoc.
really want
Yeah.
to start creating dedicated metaverses, right? And the
Yeah.
other thing I explain to them is that, boss, if you're getting into it, be serious about it, have the budget for it, because this is not a cheap thing you're trying to build, you know?
Absolutely, and it's not as simple as that. You telling us and it getting created in whips. It's going to take some time. You need to have time. You need to have budget, and you need to have that
Hmm.
understanding. So if you really want to
Absolutely.
create a niche out of it, I was just recently talking with somebody who had built a metaverse, and that
Hmm.
metaverse started say from about $50,000, and it ended up being spending that company spent about $100,000 just on the metaverse space, for that
Yeah.
experience, and they want to have integrations with so many things.
Yep.
But the
And
challenge with that is that education needs to come, and especially in the in today's market, people don't really have that much time to wait, so they want something very readily
agree.
available.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
it's instant gratification. Yeah. You see, the other
Yeah.
problem is that setting up the metaverse is just the beginning of the issue, right?
Yeah.
A metaverse is a persistent space. It has to be maintained, it has to be curated, it has to be run, it has to be expanded, like saying. So
Yeah.
setting up the metaverse is just a basic, this is your starting point, man. Like after that, then you need to expand it. You need to get the community inside it. You need to start having events inside it, doing stuff like it. So
Yeah.
yeah, definitely, man. My job is to tell them that, listen, man, just creating the metaverse, it's not like a website where you fire and forget. Like, you it needs constant curation. And so you're going
Yeah.
to have dedicated teams for that. So it's not like a one-time expense of $100,000. It's a running monthly expense that you have to also start paying, for the servers,
Absolutely.
um, for
Yeah.
the curation and all that. So that's what I try and explain to, you know, all my clients. That if you're doing this, then it's for the long run, boss. It's not going to be temporary.
Oh,
So think about
absolutely. So we have another
it.
question come up from yeah, from another user. So they're
Huh.
talking about what is metaverse and banking. I have a fantastic idea, but please go ahead.
No,
I
no.
would like
Why
to hear
don't you
your
explain
thoughts.
the idea? It's very straightforward. You know.
Yeah, so this is simply like creating a digital twin. Again, you want to go and you want to experience how so there are multiple functions banking can perform in metaverse. One
Huh.
uh, is education.
Huh.
You want to go
Huh.
understand what different aspects of metaverse is. So this is
Yeah.
similar to like you go to your banking, your physical bank, and you have all these 7 8 desks aligned. The
Hmm.
advantage in metaverse would be you don't have to go there physically. You're saving time, and
Yeah.
all that information would be available inside the banking metaverse at the click of a button. So I am happy to look at a use case where there's a lot of integration between multiple banks in a single metaverse environment. So because I have
Yeah.
multiple bank accounts, I can translate from one to the other, and then
Yeah.
you can except taking out cash from an ATM inside a bank, you can do pretty much everything.
All your transactions and stuff. You see, and the thing
All
is
your
that
transactions. Yeah.
there are niches and niches to this. So basically, for example, all your mobile banking and online banking happens through your phone. So that's not like really
Yeah.
a process that you can optimize as such, right? What
Yeah.
there'll be more need for is like getting in touch with a representative to find out about
Yeah.
your account or your demat or your or your insurance and stuff like that. What are the deals that the bank can give you? And speaking to a real person face to face is always a lot better than actually trying to, get through like your call center and your helplines and stuff. So
Yeah.
I do think there's a contribution for that interpersonal interaction to start happening. When people are wanting to set up their account or they want to actually see how they can expand or save money and stuff. There would
Yeah.
be a real person at the other end inside the metaverse talking to them rather than a you know chatbot.
Yes, and that's going to be a very important thing because when you listen, see what happens is when you are in a need and you want to go to that IVR, we all
Hmm.
trying to get to a bank and you want to, you quickly only look for that answer where it says, now click this particular number to speak to a executive. So
It's
there's a
yeah,
lot of
horrifying.
impatience between, from that point to this point, right? So to
Right.
take over all of that, you can go to a metaverse. A bank can create metaverse and they can have, their representatives
Absolutely.
sitting at the back.
Yep.
It becomes easier for everybody. You save time, you save fuel, it's more greener. So to say,
Yep.
what people are not seeing this as a green initiative, you know,
True
for a
that.
lot of transactions.
True that. True that. In fact, in the early days, what used to happen was that I was setting up a lot of corporate spaces inside virtual worlds like Second Life for a lot of my clients. Right now,
Mhm.
and Zoom has really, for example, the whole online video communication thing has really transformed that industry. I mean, COVID brought it about, but you see, the thing is, people are
Enforce it.
saving a huge amount of money on traveling physically to places to actually have meetings. When you a Zoom call would be 1/100th the cost of like flying like 10 executives to a nice place, and and the same paradigm carries on into metaverses. They're more efficient that way.
Absolutely. And the other advantage is instead of going to say a beach, like you want to go to say Goa in India or Pondicherry, or you want to fly
Hmm.
to Maldives for a offsite, you can experience that, you know, in say one tenth or
Yeah,
maybe hundredth of a cost. And sit. Obviously, there's no denying real life experiences, but
I'd
there is
rather
a
have. Yeah. I'm saying like see the thing is I've had parties in
yeah,
the metaverse and there have been some
yeah,
banging parties, for example, but there's
yeah,
nothing like actually going to a festival and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sweating it out.
Oh,
You know.
absolutely. So we have another question. It says that are Indian banks willing to implement in nearest future for superlative experience? I think yes. What is your? I mean, like,
Speculative, you know. I mean, yes
yeah.
and no. We won't know till we know.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So so I've had this experience of like talking with different in government banking institutions in
Uh-huh.
India, and they are very open to the idea of creating metaverses, and they want to see how the use cases pan out. So the
Hmm.
discussions are going on right now, but uh, so there are banks also willing to do that. Why? It could be FOMO. It could be to have that one up advantage over the competitor, right?
Or
Because
extra
at the end,
functionality,
extra
you know.
functionality, yeah.
You
So
know.
it's all about trying to have that say so to say first mover advantage.
True that, true that. Plus the idea of having additional functionality. Yeah. You see, as more and more users migrate to the metaverse in later
Hmm.
years, right?
Hmm.
Institutions are going to have that need to actually get inside, right?
Hmm.
Because it's an extra set of services and functionalities that you can give at very little extra cost.
Absolutely, absolutely. Compared to, okay, so now we have big questions. So we have, what are you hearing about metaverse and use of blockchain for it impacting ESG initiative of an organization?
Oh, tricky question. Yeah. Abhi to,
Yeah,
it's a very tricky, right? Because governance and things like that then is a very centralized concept to start
yeah.
with, right? But culturally, you see, the thing is that this is an entire system that needs to evolve. This is an entire infrastructure that needs to evolve. It's not going to happen tomorrow or overnight,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
The thing is, like I said, there has to be a process where people actually get inside the metaverse. They understand what they can do inside it, right? And then
yeah.
start seeing if they can, implement existing policies that they have across the metaverse versions of these organizations.
Absolutely. So it's a long process, right? Right now, people are just
It's
trying to
not, yeah.
understand how it can actually do for
They're
them,
dipping their
and I think
toes, yeah.
absolutely slowly and steadily. Because what happens is you have to understand. this is an answer to the user who asked this question, that for
Hmm.
any bank, see, banks are
Hmm.
financial institutions, so there is a lot
Yep.
of data, there has to be a lot of privacy, and there has to be a lot of security, right? It's not only
Sure.
money. So they have to take care of all of this and add to it the technological advancement that it requires and the
Yep.
understanding of that. So they
Right.
would have somebody like a innovation specialist within their bank, and they will reach out to company like like Rahul, or our company
Hmm.
Animo Solution, or some other level big company, depending upon what scale bank is, and then they will
Hmm.
start talking about it.
Yep.
Getting actual into a metaverse will take a little longer. People have started doing it, and
Yep.
and we have a follow-up question here from Sudipto. Oh, that's a big one. So he says,
All
thanks
right.
for sharing all of this information. I have a question. What kind of usage and success are companies seeing with this? For instance, is there a bank that has seen success with setting up a metaverse presence? Can you share numbers, ROI, your customers have seen so far? Follow-up question, which industry do you think will see the most upstick? So there are multiple parts. One is,
I got you.
the people who have it, are there successes? Are people seeing success in metaverse?
Right. See, the thing is, of course, people are seeing initial successes, right?
Hmm.
Bearing in mind that it's a very different format from the one that they've actually encountered so far, right? So
Hmm.
nobody's giving you, there are no ROI numbers, for example, that are tangible at the moment across any of these companies that I know of, at least, right? Secondly,
Yeah.
there seem to be a lot of bankers here, man. Banking is not the only thing that's getting into the metaverse in a big way. I mean, it's retail,
Yeah.
it's shopping, it's fashion, it's a lot of, you see, so think of it as at the moment an interesting new platform to actually try out stuff with, right? It's not
Yeah.
going to replace any existing business protocols and business methodologies anytime soon, right?
Hmm.
Once people get a little more into it, and of course, like for instance, there are success stories like Gucci and Nike, for instance. They put out their stuff in the metaverse. It got sold. They're trying to actually link NFTs with physical goods. For example,
Yeah.
there are lots of experiments going on in the space, and bear in mind that this has only been going on, actually, seriously speaking, for about the last year, right?
Yeah.
So nobody has really gotten into it, in a really gigantic way. But we are at some point, once people have figured out the experimentation, we're going to see that gigantic entry coming in at some point or the other. Hasn't come in
Yeah.
on any level at the moment. Right. And for the follow-up question, which industry do you think will see the most uptick in usage? There are a few obvious ones like your retail and and gaming and other companies
Fashion.
in
Yeah.
that scope, fashion, but there are also very interesting experiments being done by the medical field, for example, or the construction business, for example, or people trying to implement digital twins. So it's very, I mean, difficult to say which specific industry will see the most uptick. I mean, the immediate question would be gaming, but that's like you know, that's kind of like an obvious thing.
Yeah, that's like a no-brainer. Yeah, so I have a answer to that as well. So the what people successes, what companies are seeing is, one, they are experimenting with it, and they are seeing
Hmm.
what sort of leverage they can create for their existing brand and different marketing channels. So a lot of companies are using it as a marketing tool rather than actually an operations tool right now.
Absolutely.
For example, so Skoda, the car brand, have a metaverse called Skodaverse. So if you want to go and
Yep.
experience that, so there you can drive, experience. You can actually drive a car within Skodaverse. I've done that, right?
Ditto.
So we had a sneak peek before it kind of came out, public, at
Hmm.
a bigger level. So you do that, and then so what their ROI in that terms, maybe not in tangible terms of money, like X amount spent and X amount gained, but it's more
Yeah.
about experience and how many more users are trying to come in, right? Because you have to understand the companies themselves are experimenting with it. Like right
Yeah.
now, recently Nike launched a partnership with Tiffany. Both had independent, NFT collections and different, offerings, separate different stuffs. But
Right.
now they recently did a collaboration. I think in the past few days only. So a lot of experimentation is happening right now in this space. And what I understand the companies are trying to leverage out is how they can have grab more attention from users, and especially the newer ones, Gen Z or Gen Alpha, whatever you call them, how they
Right.
can grab more eyeballs and more attention, because these are the future customers.
Also, the ROI would come in areas also which people are not really expecting at the moment.
Yeah,
For example, you could totally legitimately have showrooms which are selling purely virtual goods, right?
yeah, yeah,
Sorry, I just saw that. Right. You have Nike, which bought out this company called Artifact, for example, whose only
yeah,
job is to make virtual shoes for avatars, right? Now,
yeah,
you never know if a virtual world gains popularity very suddenly. Um, it might just be a good ROI for them from this unexpected thing of selling only virtual goods, right?
yeah,
In fact, again, going back to Second Life, I mean, it's been around since 2003, right? And
yeah,
there is a thriving economy of people who are only building virtual goods for this virtual world, who are actually kind of, getting um, earning money out of it, right?
yeah,
Personally, my ROI in the early days, for example, was just building spaces for big organizations,
mhm,
and making sure that they had some practical functionalities in them, right? So your digital marketing of virtual goods, for example, making digital twins which improve the efficiency of your thing. That's
yeah,
intangible ROI. That you can't really say that I've got X amount of rupees from doing this, but the
yeah.
benefits will come through an increase in efficiency and a decrease in economic, um, a decrease in costs for actually.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to, evolve a lot. The more people
Hmm.
start talking about it, the more technology becomes more readily available. The way
Right.
I'm seeing it right now is that the way you have websites, everybody needs to have a website. Within
Right.
the next 5 to 7 years, everyone would be required. It's going to
Hmm.
be an external post rather than an internal post right now. Required to
Right.
have a metaverse for themselves, irrespective in what shape and form, whether part
Yep.
of as a part of the whole big one, which actually should be a metaverse. Everyone will have their own mini verses, and they would be
Hmm.
required because
Yep.
as the generation which kind of consumes their product changes,
Hmm.
so that's what I'm trying to say. As the generation
Right.
which consumes their product, the people who are in colleges right now or in schools, once they start
Right.
consuming their products, they would be required because people will say, I
Absolutely.
want to
Yeah.
go to Nike showroom in metaverse and buy and a sneaker from there instead of
Yep.
going to a shop and wasting 1 hours 2 hours to do the whole experience and come back. And
Absolutely.
India could be the first place, where I see it is because our penetration for a lot of
Hmm.
our social interaction through social apps like Flipkart, Amazon, all those apps.
Hmm.
We're doing a lot of buying online. So for us as a country, it should be the fastest thing to happen. That's the way I see it.
Absolutely. And beyond that, yeah, like fun fact, I set up my first, obviously, the first Trimensions office was in the metaverse, right?
Fantastic.
And what used to happen was that when clients used to give me inquiries or ask me if something was possible or if we can do something inside Second Life, the first thing I used to do was tell them, Ki, come, let's meet in my office and let's have a discussion on that inside the metaverse. Why are we
Yeah.
talking, outside, you know? So definitely, like these kind of use cases are very, very tangible, and they're going to be a lot more coming in years to come.
Yeah.
And you might have entire like 9 to 5 like full-time jobs that are completely inside metaverses.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
yeah.
so
Absolutely. No, no, I totally agree with that. So what will happen eventually is, that people would want to, save time because the traffic
mm,
coming outside, and so again, it's going to be an external factor. A lot of external, like COVID, enforced everybody to move online, start having companies,
yep,
and the companies, like especially banking and all those companies, were the ones which had most reluctant to move
yep,
online space. Their people would not be allowed to have laptops at home and stuff like that. And when COVID struck,
yep,
lot of that started to happen. So suddenly trust also came into the picture. So it required an enforcer. I'm not saying that the trust wasn't there earlier, but what I'm trying to say
mm,
is it needs that extra little push. Need of the hour,
absolutely.
so to say, which
And
kind
this
of
is a
COVID
societal change. This is a
societal
societal
change
change. You
across the
know,
globe.
so
Across the
yep.
globe.
And people
And
are working from
and
home and they don't want to get back to office. I mean, that's a trend. You know.
yeah, absolutely. And now it's the other way around. So people are saying, no, see, there are advantages. I personally have experienced the other advantages of having, sitting together next to each other and trying. You can solve things much faster. But then there's
Hmm,
a huge advantage which gives you this, this working online also gives you, right?
absolutely.
And
Yeah.
And metaverse will, I think, will over a period of time enable that.
I know I'm hardcore. Yeah, like I've been working from home for the last 15 years. We're good. I'm not
Yeah,
telling people that there's no better way to do things, than
yeah,
remotely. But I guess I'm a little,
absolutely.
heretical, heretical in that
Yeah,
respect.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So we also had a quick hello from Dr. Mitra. At the start of our podcast, we missed that. So hello, Dr. Mitra. Thank you so much for joining in. Right. Cool. Interesting, Rahul. So I think we're pretty much at the end. So this has been one of my longest podcast. I have just a two, a couple of ender. I had tons. I can talk a lot more. We both are very,
Right.
I would say, infatuated with the metaverse and live our lives
Absolutely.
there. Right. So
Absolutely.
a couple of ender questions. As you
Hmm.
stand today, you talk to a lot of people. So your outlook for Web3 and metaverse growth. So is it
Hmm.
positive, negative, or neutral? How do you see that today?
Absolutely positive. Yeah. See, the thing is that it was a really major thing. 2022 saw a lot of major collapses in the Web3 space, for example, and in the blockchain space. And
Yeah,
to a large extent, metaverses themselves were completely unaffected by that. You know,
yeah,
that people were still interested in metaverses, didn't matter where the crypto market was going and stuff. That interest has continued, and it's growing stronger. Because
yeah,
now like more and more companies are wanting to actually try stuff out. Like, let's see, this sounds interesting. Everyone's talking about it. We should get into it at some point as well.
yeah.
Um, but the thing is that there is some translation needed in terms of, what are you actually going to do once you're inside the metaverse? Do you want to actually set up a shop and keep it empty, or do you actually want to make it like a working sort of environment? So those questions
Environment,
are
yeah.
kind of good. Yeah, yeah. So that interest is going up, and once people actually start finding good practical uses, and there are enough people on, I think there'll be a paradigm shift. Yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. So, last question, one or two critical pieces of advice for people, primarily students, who want to get into
Hmm.
Web3 space right now, or,
Right.
the new companies or somebody who's becoming a first time entrepreneur.
Hmm. Got it. So, yeah, see, the thing is, don't try and jump into it all at once because it can get quite overwhelming and very intimidating and possibly turn you off, right? The way to do it is just to experiment as much as you can, just going into different kinds of metaverses, whether it's the VR kind of metaverses, whether it's standard machine metaverses, whether it's crypto metaverses, DIOR. Yeah, well, yeah, some research is
Mhm.
needed, but the idea is
Yeah,
to actually have fun, man. Like the thing is, it's
yeah,
such a new paradigm. You get to meet so many interesting people. You can maybe have some lifelong friendships and relationships that can be engendered in here.
yeah,
It's a fun space to be, so it's important to have that fun, and try doing lots of different things before you kind of settle down into what you want to actually do for the longer term.
yeah. Absolutely. So I'll add a bit here, and then we have another question. So people don't want us to go. So I'll have another follow-up question, in the comments. Right. So what you said, Rahul said, very right. Have joy, have fun in it. You're going to learn a lot if you're an organization setting up a metaverse. There's going to be a lot of experimentation, tons of involved, and mistakes happening. It's a new thing. A lot of people are trying it for the first time. You may not know correctly. You may not know. You may know correctly, but be cautious. Do your own research. That's what DYOR means, and that's
Yep,
exactly how you're going to have that implemented and and experience it often. Not just go it once time
absolutely,
and then get out. Try different platforms. You can reach out to
absolutely, yeah.
Rahul or me on LinkedIn to try and know
Hmm.
about different platforms and how you can experience. Right?
And meet inside them. Like I'm in metaverses all the time, so like it's very easy to
Yeah.
meet me inside a virtual space, and then we
Absolutely.
could, maybe guys like us can show you around and show you some of the interesting things to do, some of the games to play,
Oh
parties to
yeah,
go to, events to, so
yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
It just have good experience. So we have another
Yeah.
question from Sudipto. He says, like, do you think Facebook or Meta's change in fortune impacts the metaverse future?
Well, see, the thing was that initially I was like really annoyed that the way Meta sort of announced its whole thing grandly, they changed the whole landscape, all of that stuff. Um, and yeah, well, I was a little sad, though I have very little love for Meta and the way it actually operates and stuff. It's a centralized agency trying to actually do these kind of things. Um, I don't think its change in fortune impacts the metaverse future at all, right? They were the ones who started the trend. Now everyone's interested in them, but everyone's interested in them in their own context, right?
Yeah.
And Facebook's is not the only metaverse around. It's not even the only metaverse around by far. It's not even the largest by far, right?
Yeah.
So any one company having a success or failure in metaverse development just reflects the company's own lines of research where it's actually tried to go, rather than actually impacting the future of the metaverse itself. Because that future
Absolutely.
I've known has been coming since like I think at least 2007 or so, and it's a running joke that I'm always saying that yeah, it's just around the corner, man. It'll happen anytime now, and I've been saying this for goddamn 15 years, right? So I'm very happy. I'm wishing, I mean, I'm hoping that the metaverse has a future. I'm hoping it doesn't like really die down, but I'm not seeing any signs of it yet, so we're good. You know?
No, it's fantastic. So I have a a slight answer to that from a marketing point of view. So Meta, Facebook fortune. So I really had this conversation by somebody very recently, about a month or so back, and that person said, so they were dealing, or talking to a customer for a metaverse project, right? This was around the time when Facebook or Meta announced in job cuts. So what
Hmm.
that company told that person was that because now Meta has announced metaverse, job cuts, we're not going to talk about metaverse right now.
Okay.
This actually happened, from a marketing point of view, is what I'm trying to say. That
Right.
relationships, and yeah, yeah. So and so
Yeah.
Dutta says, his kids are hooked on to Roblox and love spending time.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. In fact,
and
Roblox, Second Life, all these are
yeah,
metaverses, man. You can't say that they're not. You know.
eventually, yeah, absolutely, and they would spend a lot of time. Like my daughter used to play a couple of games here, and I'm forgetting the names also now.
Hmm.
They try and find the who's the killer, in
Yeah,
that
yeah, mystery rooms and stuff and all. There's a
mystery.
lot
Yeah,
of
it's something
entertaining
like that.
things that you
Yeah,
can do inside metaverses,
yeah,
proper gaming stuff as well. And yes, of course, you're spending money inside it. In fact, my niece is like a Minecraft genius.
yeah,
The stuff she builds in Minecraft, and she's like 10 years old, and I'm like, my God, that is incredible. That kids today are really sort of figuring out how to build stuff inside virtual worlds, which old fogies like us are taking like months to try and understand, man. Like, man, we have to
yeah,
figure out Unreal, we have to figure out Unity. Oh shit, how are we going to do this?
yeah.
Kids are just like, yeah, doing it, man, like immediately. So,
Yeah, it comes like a second nature to them.
I
Cool,
know, and
cool,
I'm
cool.
very envious of it, man, honestly.
Yeah. No, so we have a lot of thankful comments as well. Thank you guys. Yes, thank you so much, users, for joining in.
Yeah,
Rahul, I think we could continue, but we could probably plan another episode with you. Since it's been such a hit,
sounds good.
and we have a lot of interaction. And yeah,
Always happy,
thank you.
man.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming in, Rahul. You have a great
Always a
day,
pleasure.
and talk to you soon. Thank you so much, viewers, for joining in. It was great, great having Rahul here, and all these questions and stuff. So thank you very much.
Always a pleasure.
Take care.
And see you again soon. Get in
See
touch.
you. Bye bye. Bye. Let me just end this part.